WWF SummerSlam 1988 here as we continue our WWE/WWF Golden Era Rewind series on the channel. SummerSlam 1998 took place on August 29th at Madison Square Garden in New York City, New York. And this is one where, again, you kind of still at this point had the WWF, Jim Crockett Promotions, battling it out, and you had kind of a disappointing Summer Spectacular from JCP. So Vince McMahon had another opportunity here to kind of deliver another blow to his competition. And we start things off in the announce booth. This is our SummerSlam 1988 review, by the way. Remember, we'll do deep dives into these shows a bit more on the channel, more long form, but these are just show reviews, giving you thoughts on what I thought as I've went back and rewatched this particular show. Gorilla Monsoon and Superstar Billy Graham are your announcers for the evening. Be prepared for lots of notes on Superstar when it comes to his commentary. Yeah, if you've watched this show at any point, you probably remember that this was a unique pairing, to say the least. Our opening match, the Fabulous Rougeaus against the British Bulldogs. I love the Rougeaus during this period. Typical sort of weasel team that brought hilarious spots to the table throughout the match. Superstar Billy Graham has already said Gorilla Monsoon about 8 times, and we're just getting things started here at the bell. And it's just, again, that was something where I go back and I'm like, Superstar Billy Graham was one of a kind, but the commentary was also one of a kind, and maybe not in the positive way that you would expect. The British Bulldogs have control of the match. We got a really hot crowd here. That's notable. And it's worth noting that, of course, Dynamite Kid and Jacques Rougeau hated each other after a backstage incident prior to this, so that adds a little bit of extra something to the match, kind of knowing that going in. Jacques regains control after pulling Davey Boy's leg and bringing him down while running the ropes. Now we've got all the, Rougeaus in this one. Davey Boy really getting worked over, but Dynamite gets the hot tag, and now things change a bit. We get a near fall. Jacques throws the foot on the ropes, though, to thwart that. Davey Boy with the power slam, but now it's the Rougeaus back in control. More underhanded tactics from the heels. Abdominal stretch is the name of the game as they start to take turns with the abdominal stretch here, which not a sequence you necessarily see in a lot of matches these days. More great work here from Ramon as he gets a cheap shot in with the ref's back turned. After more of the Rougeaus working over the British Bulldogs here, I hope you can tell where we're headed as I explain all this back and forth. We get a hot tag to Davey Boy Smith. Dynamite then hits the headbutt, but the bell rings. We have a time limit draw at 11 minutes and 19 seconds. Yes, apparently the time limit on this match was 11 minutes and 19 seconds. So, jokes aside, which is not really much of a joke, that's exactly what the timing was here, but we do get a time limit draw. Chase to the back afterwards. So, a pretty good match here, to be honest with you. This was good stuff, not to be, that caught off guard given these two teams, but pretty good match. But yeah, time limit doesn't really give you a whole lot to work with beyond that. All right, we go to a video package here, and it is recent events from Outlaw Ron Bass just completely destroying Brutus Beefcake. And now that means that the Honky Tonk Man doesn't have a challenger for the Intercontinental title match later on. But Gorilla Monsoon says that someone will challenge Honky Tonk Man later, and you knew that this would ultimately happen. Key word there, ultimately. Let's see who challenges Honky Tonk Man a little bit later on. Bad News Brown versus Ken Patera. Superstar Billy Graham still, the Gorilla Monsoon counter is higher and higher, almost to 50 at this point. There's really not a lot to say here, folks. Bad News Brown was not going to lose to Ken Patera here in 1988. And this match went about 6 minutes, 35 seconds, some back and forth as you would expect. Both guys, had the advantage at one point or another, but Bad News Brown hits the Ghetto Blaster for the win at 6:35. This was not great. Went pretty long here. If you would have thought this one was going to hit 6:35, you probably would have been like, yeah, I'm okay. So, not the best match in the world. Backstage, Mean Gene Okerlund with Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, and Elizabeth. The Mega Powers are ready. And now that gets us to our next match. Rick Rude with Bobby Heenan versus the Junkyard Dog. Rude, before the match, uses the term inner city sweat hogs, which I think was one of his best lines that he had, really knocking the crowd here in New York City. Just a national treasure was the ravishing one. JYD rushes Rude out of the ring immediately, and this has already eclipsed our previous match, I would say. Rude back in control. We get to some rest holds here, and then JYD gets the look and decides to pounce. But that doesn't last long because Rude goes up top, and he exposes the trunks under his trunks. And it is the face of Cheryl Roberts, which, of course, was Jake the Snake Roberts' wife. That causes Jake to run out and blast him, which causes the DQ. At 3 minutes and 55 seconds, I think, you go back and see some people in their reaction to this particular match. A lot of people were kind of asking the question, why not just do Rick Rude versus Jake Roberts here instead? But you get 4 minutes, basically, of Rude versus the Junkyard Dog. This furthers it to keep things going with Rude and Jake. But, yeah, anytime you put a woman's face, and specifically a woman who is married to another man, on your tights, that's not going to go over well, especially when her face is right on the junk. So that's what Rick Rude did here in this one. Okay, backstage, the Honky Tonk Man does not give a damn who his opponent is for the IC title. He may change his tune on that one. We just got puns everywhere for this Intercontinental title situation. All right, tag team matchup next. The Bolsheviks with Slick versus the Powers of Pain with the Baron. And as if the WWF Tag Team division needed another strong team, here we have the Barbarian and Warlord straight out of JCP, where they had been booked to face the Road Warriors in a scaffold match at the Great American Bash before they jumped ship. So I can remember going back and watching those shows during the period. They were clearly building up to this match, but didn't happen. They come to the WWF. And the Madison Square Garden crowd absolutely loves the Powers of Pain here. How could you not? I mean, the Barbarian and Warlord, just two brick houses here. I mean, just absolute monsters. So, two houses that were badasses. You can sign me up for that one, and it's clear that the Powers of Pain weren't selling anything in this match, and they shouldn't because they were coming in on a mission here. And total squash mode as the Powers of Pain get the victory at 4:43 to eventually prepare themselves with a showdown with Demolition. It felt inevitable, kind of at this point, with these guys coming in. So, not much of a match, but notable with the Powers of Pain here. All right, in the ring, we get a Brother Love segment with Hacksaw Jim Duggan. It's just kind of your typical Brother Love, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Think about these two interacting, and yeah, it's just a segment. That's about it. So, you need to fill some time here, and that's what we had with this one. All right, that's going to lead us to our Intercontinental title match. The Honky Tonk Man, who is he going to face? He's in the ring. He's ready. Who will be the opponent for the Honky Tonk Man? And here we go. More often than not, you know when a star is officially born, and this was one of those cases. The roof absolutely comes off of MSG here when the Ultimate Warrior's music hits. And at that point, you knew that this ascent had begun for the Ultimate Warrior, and they took it a step further because he completely squashes the Honky Tonk Man, scores the pin at 30 seconds to win the title. So after Honky Tonk Man rules the Intercontinental title scene for over a year with, matches that were not necessarily well received, this had to happen. You had to get the title off of him, and the people absolutely loved it. Perfect booking. I thought, just again, that the contrast of the Warrior who comes in and just obliterates this guy after, the heel had just kind of had a reign of terror over the Intercontinental title picture for so long, just comes in and completely destroys the guy. No shenanigans, nothing. So, obviously a squash match here, but I think you could, if you're throwing some star ratings at this, I think you could throw a few at it at least because the overall importance of it and what it meant for the Ultimate Warrior. And just like I said, that reaction is the thing that stands out the most. Like the fans they had to have it. And the Honky Tonk Man doesn't lose in a 15-minute match here to have, the valiant heel go out with a huge effort. No, he's been an absolute coward at times during his reign, so he gets the title taken off of him, and he gets beaten down in 30 seconds by, the monster he just could not slay. So, great way to tell the story, I thought. And it absolutely made the Ultimate Warrior here in just a huge moment. Okay, this next match, not so much. I think we're going to not qualify this here. All right, it's Don Morocco versus Dino Bravo with Frenchie Martin. So this is a WrestleMania 4 rematch. These two guys faced off in the tournament for the WWF title. And, yeah, I mean, these two maybe like in a different world could have been a great tag team, just given their physical acumen. But I think Bobby the Brain Heenan's on commentary here, and that at least adds something to the duo of Gorilla and Superstar, who is still on the Gorilla Monsoon kick. This match, not great. And Bravo hits the side slam for the win, like 2 minutes into this thing, I guess, something like that. So he gets revenge from the WrestleMania tournament match, but I mean, there's nothing more to it. This is just a match that is absolutely, can be skipped. You don't have to watch this match. Like, there's just nothing here. So, watch the one at WrestleMania 4. That one was a bit better. Okay, backstage, Jesse Ventura is the referee for tonight's main event, and Sean Moody is questioning him. These two interacting, I think, were a pretty fun duo here, having Sean and Jesse. Anytime they interacted, I always enjoyed it. So, you had that here. All right, tag team action. The Hart Foundation versus the champions Demolition with Mr. Fuji and Jimmy Hart. This is for the WWF Tag Team titles. And the story here is that the Hart Foundation are the good guys now after sending Jimmy packing. So Jimmy's out of there. So the Hart Foundation have gotten away from their conniving manager here. But the thing is, Jimmy still owned the team's contract. So he could technically appear ringside for this one, even though he was not in their corner. Great stuff. Like, this is why I enjoy the 80s stuff, because it's like, that's a tiny little detail you throw in there. The man who still has a contract with his team and doesn't manage them anymore can appear ringside because he has the manager's contract and it's in there. Great stuff. It was impossible not to cheer Demolition at this point, though. These guys were just so over, just total beasts. Bret Hart, showcasing his wrestling ability early on, delivers a good sequence of moves to both Axe and Smash. The game starts to change a little bit, though, as Smash sort of rifles Bret Hart's shoulder first into the post. So you've got that playing up a little bit here. That leads to a lot of offense from Demolition before we get the hot tag to Jim Neidhart, but the referee didn't see it. So Bret's still taking a beating. Finally, though, Jim Neidhart gets the legal tag. He slams everyone in sight. Just absolutely running wild here. We get a cool kind of slingshot spot over the top with Neidhart taking out Smash. Gets the near fall on the power slam. Bret gets another near fall on Smash, and the crowd's kind of reacting every single near fall here, which is what you want. Neidhart heads over to attack Mr. Fuji on the apron. That's enough to distract the referee, and that allows Jimmy Hart to throw the megaphone to Axe. I'll give you two guesses as to what he does with it. Axe bonks Bret Hart with the megaphone, and Smash scores the pin to retain at 8 minutes and 11 seconds. I like this one probably about as much as I like the opener with the Rougeaus and the British Bulldogs, which, as I said, just really showcased the tag team depth at the time in the WWF. So, really good match here, and you knew Jimmy Hart was going to play into the finish, given the story they were telling with his contract with the Hart Foundation. So, two legendary teams and a pretty good match here between these two. All right, backstage, the Honky Tonk Man's pissed. That's all you need to know. He's not happy about losing the title to the Ultimate Warrior. All right, here comes the Big Boss Man with Slick. He's going to take on Coco Beware. We got another squash match here, in case you couldn't tell by that lineup. Boss Man, obviously very talented for someone of his size, and these two work pretty well together. Not a lengthy match, but the crowd does kind of go bananas here when Coco almost gets a near fall midway through, but the Boss Man hits the side slam right after that to get the victory at 5 minutes and 55 seconds. The crowd was into it. It was pretty short, but also, believe it or not, it was a little bit shorter than the Bad News Brown Ken Patera match, which should not have been the case. But this was more enjoyable than that. So a fine match to showcase Boss Man's abilities, and that's all you need sometimes when you're trying to accomplish that. So backstage, the Ultimate Warrior has a promo, and he is very excited after winning the Intercontinental title. Meanwhile, Don Morocco's here, and he's just hanging out in nothing but a towel. So everyone, the celebration has started for the Ultimate Warrior here in this one. All right, next up, we got Hercules versus Jake the Snake Roberts. So like I said, you had Jake and Rude both on this card, but not together. Herc tries to attack Jake from behind to start the match, but that doesn't go well. However, Herc does eventually lock in the chin lock here to take control of the match midway through. Superstar Billy Graham, I've kind of knocked him saying Gorilla Monsoon hundreds of times at this point, but he actually does a pretty good job here of selling Herc as a pretty dangerous threat to Jake, just given Herc's, kind of physique and skill set and all that. A pretty slow-paced match in this one. They weren't exactly going 100 miles an hour, more methodical. And maybe that was just to bring the crowd down a little bit before the main event, but the finish is probably predictable. Jake gets the DDT. He pins Herc for the win at 10 minutes and 8 seconds. Not a lot of heat, as you would, maybe think there would be in this match, but yeah, it was one that they had to get 10 minutes out of it, and they did. That's probably the best way to put it. And like I said, I think if you just look at it from the combination of what they could have done, could you have just done Rick Rude versus Jake Roberts and then done Herc versus the Junkyard Dog and still got plenty out of it? Probably. You would have had a much more heated match versus the two split. You just didn't get that other than, Jake playing a factor in the Rude thing, but you didn't have Rude at all here. So I don't know. It's just kind of one of those where clearly they had a plan of where they were going, more to get to with Jake and Rude, but yeah, you wonder if they could have maybe swapped it up a little bit, given the rivalry between those two. All right, we get a video package here building up the main events, and the build was obviously pretty good stuff. You go back and look at all the events leading up to our tag team match, which is Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase versus Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. You got Bobby Heenan and Virgil in the corner of the heels. Elizabeth is in the corner of Hogan and Savage, and your special guest referee is Jesse Ventura. Now, a sidebar here to what could have been. We'll do more of a deep dive on SummerSlam 98 eventually, or SummerSlam 88 eventually. But it's worth noting, and it is kind of common knowledge probably at this point. If you didn't know this little factoid, we're going to throw it in here anyways. That Vince was doing some serious negotiating at this point, according to reports, to try and bring Ric Flair into the WWF. Reportedly went as far as offering him a title match against Savage here in the main event slot, but Flair decides to stay with Jim Crockett Promotions, and so think about what would have been. Instead of this tag team match, you could have had Randy Savage, who had won the title in the WrestleMania 4 tournament to win the vacated championship, versus a Ric Flair who jumped from Jim Crockett Promotions and was obviously still at the top of his game. That could have been something. We'd eventually get that, several years later at WrestleMania, but didn't happen here. Jesse Ventura already showing his authority by changing the tag ropes to different corners. So Jesse is taking control of the match, just as you would expect a special guest referee to do. Then we almost get him almost belting Hogan, which I'm sure he just thought about just going over and just walloping Hulk Hogan. Doesn't happen. Andre and Savage get things started before DiBiase tags in quickly. Then we have Savage tagging in Hogan, and Hogan gets the most of this exchange. But after a few minutes, all of a sudden, Andre and DiBiase are now working over Hogan. DiBiase locks on the sleeper hold, while Gorilla and Superstar are knocking Jesse's refereeing skills here. Hogan finally able to make the tag to Savage, and Savage goes haywire on DiBiase, but Savage's luck kind of runs out here as DiBiase delivers a hard clothesline before tagging in Andre, and now we come full circle with Hogan getting the tag and going at DiBiase. Hogan drops Andre, and the crowd can't believe it. Anytime Hulk Hogan sent Andre the Giant down, it was the biggest moment you were going to get in this era, just based on the history and the interactions between these two, mythical type figures. Then we have Savage catching a boot from Andre off the top rope. Andre then clears the ring as he and DiBiase momentarily are standing tall here. So the heels have all the momentum. And that leads to the famous spot, because here comes Elizabeth, who gets up on the apron, and Elizabeth removes her skirt. She's got legs, and she knows how to use them. And even Elizabeth has to drop her head here and laugh at kind of the absurdity of this whole thing. As Elizabeth has removed her skirt, you've got the heels here and Andre and DiBiase just kind of, giving a glare at things. And Hogan and Savage then do their super awesome handshake. So the plan has worked. They've got Elizabeth kind of just showing whatever she's going to show here to the two heels. So they do their super awesome handshake, and then they completely take over the match, and Hogan gets the pin on DiBiase at 14 minutes and 48 seconds. Absurdity aside, just of the, the whole kind of 80s type theme to this thing. This was a fun match from start to finish, and it probably, you think about every single person that was involved in this, like the entire thing. Andre, DiBiase, Heenan, Virgil, Hogan, Savage, Elizabeth, and Jesse. I mean, that's a hell of a squad right there if you're putting on a main event. And you need all these people to somehow play a different role somehow. That's a pretty good thing. So, fun match, and we know the Mega Powers are on full display here, as it was the Mega Powers versus the Mega Bucks. And yeah, we know this story is going to take a step forward as we start to move into late 88 and early 89. But there's that. All right. Best match on the show, I will give it to the main event. I thought that was the best match. The two tag team matches, listen, were pretty good. Like I said, the Fabulous Rougeaus, British Bulldogs, and the tag team match between the Hart Foundation and Demolition, both good matches. But like I said, I think the stacked lineup of personalities that you had in the main event, and, yes, it was the longest one on the show, but I thought this was the most enjoyable. So I'm going to give that to the best match. But recommended matches, I'd also throw in the two tag team matches in there. The ones I just mentioned, they would be recommended. So those three tag team matches, all recommended, I think, on this show. The SummerSlam MVP, I'm going to go with maybe a wow pick here, but I'm going to give it to Miss Elizabeth because she played such a big role in the finish that we're going to give Elizabeth the MVP. She was the most valuable player of the show based on the value she brought to the winning team of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Overall thoughts on SummerSlam 1988. Is it worth watching? It was far from a great show. It was really a lot about the storyline advancement rather than awesome matches, but there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, all the tag team matches on the show were entertaining, and the main event delivered a solid payoff here, and it of course has to play a role in the story that is to come. Things had not sort of amped up just yet, but you have to have that friendship built between Savage and Hogan before the eventual downfall of those two, before the Mega Powers explode. So this plays a big role in that, just establishing whether it is something as ridiculous as the super duper awesome handshake or whatever. Like, you have to establish that these guys are on the same page and that Elizabeth plays a role in this somehow, and we know that's going to escalate from here. So, yeah, I thought this was, honestly, it would be a recommended show. I think this is one that, it's the first ever SummerSlam, and it's one that I think really is something that is going to be pretty noteworthy when you go back and look at some of the stuff just because of the roster itself. But, yeah, I would recommend the first SummerSlam. Not the greatest show or anything, but there's enough on it that I think makes for a fun, nostalgic watch here for SummerSlam 1988. But you guys let me know what you think. Here, when's the last time you watched SummerSlam 1988? What are your thoughts on it? What are your favorite matches, favorite memories from this? And like I mentioned, I didn't even bring up the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, that's a notable, significant moment with the Ultimate Warrior as well. So, what are your thoughts on SummerSlam 1988? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button if you enjoy all the nostalgia. You're going to get more of it here at Rewind Wrestling. We have series on the Golden Era, the New Generation Era, Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression Era, and more eventually in the future. So, appreciate you guys listening or watching, and let me know your thoughts on SummerSlam 1988.